Hey, everybody. It is world building night. Yay, on the
Yes.
Write a Novel with Dabble in 60 Days writing challenge check in, which it seems like we've kind of settled on Wednesday nights. I hope that works for everybody. It seems to be working. So, we'll, uh, we'll keep going with the flow until we're forced to do otherwise. But joining me tonight, Lauren Moore, Josh Hayes, Ian Garner, and Amy Hale will be popping in soon, I presume. I haven't heard otherwise from her, so we're out, and there she is. Let's add her to the stream. Hi, Amy. I
Hey.
was we just went live and was just adding everybody to the chat. So there's Amy Hale joining us now tonight. We're going to talk about world building, and I have a specific thing that I want to talk through with you guys that I've kind of uh, come up in my writing because I'm actually taking this planning month and working on my plan and thinking about my story before the writing starts in earnest, which is new for me. And so I have questions that have come up that I want to work through, and which has been a fantastic thing for me because it's forced me to think about my story and to come up with new things that I might not have come up with if I wouldn't have slowed down and given myself that time to think about it, which again, is kind of new for me. I'm used to just kind of running off with where the story takes me. So anyway, Lauren, how are you this evening? I'm just gonna go around the table here as it's appearing on my screen. How are you, ma'am?
I'm doing great. I was editing all morning. Did make it to the gym with my brother, and he put me through my paces with this app that he's doing, and he goes at it. He's been doing it pretty madly, but we were pretty exhausted by the end of that, and then went to exhaust the brain with some editing real quick because I had babysitting in the afternoon. So kind of running from one thing to another, and now I'm ready to just kind of chill and relax with y'all and just have a good time tonight and talk about world building, making someone else work and not me. Yeah. Ah.
Awesome. How's your plan coming along? I know you've been doing a lot of groundwork and on your story and the world you're writing in and all that. How's that coming along?
I'm still in research mode. I am listening to book 3, and as the plot unfolds,
Yeah.
actually the world and the setting is becoming even more important to the character's story and where it's going, and also to my story as I'm thinking it through. So I'm in the middle of book 3, and now I'm listening to book 1 again as well because I'm taking notes. I'm getting these details together. I'm trying to organize it and figure out exactly who who's there in my cast and what is there and what villains are possible. So definitely still like got the encyclopedia out. We'll be talking about world building, how to organize this stuff, and how Dabble can use. You can use Dabble for that, and also Google Docs or Word doc or whatever you've got available to you to organize all this stuff.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
I'd love to see a plan of brewing.
Yes.
Yeah. Ian, how are you? You were out last week. You had some stuff going on. Glad to have you back.
Oh yeah.
How's the planning phase going for you?
So far so good. I feel like I've got a firm grasp on the main plot of the story. What I've been working on this week is trying to fill in some of that B plot. What happens with the side characters? What happens with fleshing the world out? Now that I know exactly where the story is going to go, how do I make it more enriching or fulfilling for the reader?
Love it. Have you come up with anything specific that you're looking at that has come to you that hey, this thing is gonna really amp up or make the story more lush or whatever it is that's adding texture to your story?
I'm going to characterize it as Irish folklore Avengers. Just
Hey,
Nice.
fun.
Nice.
I
just
dig it.
take every heavy hitter from Irish or Celtic mythology, and they're going to be part of the story as well. And I'm looking
Nice.
really forward to that part.
I love it. So a little American Gods mixed in there as well.
Yes, that's precisely it. Yes,
Really
Love
yes.
it.
interesting.
Love it. Love it.
Are you
Yeah.
gonna have Selkies in there?
I'm gonna have that. I know that there's at least one banshee, a green man,
Okay.
and possibly a leprechaun. I haven't
Okay.
decided yet. We'll see. There's room.
I
I
like
love it.
little house brownies, the little mischievous guys.
Pretty
And then Selkies are so
Oh, yeah.
mysterious.
I'm not saying that anyone in our family has ever been dubbed a leprechaun because we tend to be Scotch and Irish and on the short side, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah.
Well, leprechauns are short.
That's where I was going. Amy, glad to have you with us. You had some personal life plot twist that that came about last week.
As a plot twist.
I hope everything has gotten a little better this week. It's good to have you back.
Thank you. Yeah, things
Yeah.
are slowly calming down. I'm not going to say back to normal because normal has changed, but
We don't-
slowly calming down.
We don't want to jinx anything, but I get
Yeah.
it. I get it. Yeah. Oh man, how's the story coming along? How's the planning phase?
Well, I'll admit I'm behind because of all the plot changes in my
Yeah.
life. But I'm getting there. I'm starting to finally get my head back in the right space because like the last week or so, I've not even been in the right headspace to write. So that's been a major challenge. But I'm getting back there now. So at this point, I'm really not very far. So I feel like I got some catching up to do now.
Well, that's the great thing about the planning month. You can always say, "Well, I've been working on the plot in my head." It's all going to come together. That's
It will.
That's what this phase of the journey is all about. Yeah, that's totally right on plan. You see,
It'll work.
nobody'd ever know. Nobody'd ever know. Joshua,
Result is
glad to have you with us tonight. How's I know that you were working on book 2 in a series that you finished up book 1. You told us last week you had kind of put the bow on that and now cranking up the other one. What's going on?
Yeah, it's funny. Amy mentioned having the plot rolling around, and then you said how that's all work. I got to get really careful because I'll sit down and like research Lord of the Rings or research Game of Thrones, and all of that the whole day just goes away. And I got to be careful with that. My week started out really slow. Monday and Tuesday didn't have very much progress. I was stuck on one of the major plot events, so actually 2. And actually one of the things that I managed to come up with Sunday or Monday, I can't remember which day, goes into world building. So I was really excited that we're talking about this week because I've got an example of that when it comes around to that. But I think I've got like 11,000 words of outline finished. I think the book is projected right now at 90. It's probably going to be about 120 ish. I always go long sometimes. But I figured out the what I wanted to do with the climax and wrapping everything together and then pushing on to the third book. So I think in the planning stages, I'm at about 80% finished with that.
Nice. Okay, before we get into our discussion, welcome everyone over in the chat, just popping off and buzzing. Love everything going on over there, and we will pop some stuff up on screen as it goes along. So be sure to join in the conversation. A couple of little housekeeping things. We are going to start next week. Storycraft Cafe, the social media site that we've got that's built just for writers and a place where everyone congregates and goes through the writerly life together. We're up to almost 1,000 members there, so you can create an account for free. Just drop by storycraft.cafe. I think you can even go to storycraftcafe.com and it all redirects to the same place. Anyway, go sign up for a free account. It's fun. It's all good vibes and good things going on there. But starting next Monday, we are going to be doing some video hangouts in the cafe, the software that the cafe runs on. It's called circle.so. They've recently upgraded their video conferencing capabilities, and we're going to be able to do some video hangouts there where all of us can get together, have a big video room, and talk through some of the same stuff that we talk about here on the YouTube Hangout. So just a place where we can get more people in, talk more about it, and really go in depth with it. So we're gonna try that out Monday, and it's gonna be Monday at noon Eastern time. So it'll be 11 Central, 10 Mountain, 9 Pacific. And then we'll also try to find a place in the evenings to make it easy for everybody to get in. Anyway, we're going to give it a try. Hope we can make it all work, but that's what we're working on. Also, for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people have signed up to do the writing challenge along with us. And today we sent out an email with a free ebook that we at Dabble put together. And if you're not on that mailing list, everyone that was signed up and on the mailing list got a free copy of it. So if you're not, go over to storycraft.cafe, find the tab for the writing challenge, and just go. All we need is a name and email, and there's a couple of questions. It's nothing big. Sign up, and we'll send that ebook to you as well. Anyway, so setting and world building. I have a very specific question that I'd like to pose to y'all, and we'll just kind of kick it off with this and just kind of let the conversation go. But the book that I'm writing is a mystery set in it's going to be set in the early to mid 90s, and there's some reasons why I said it then, mostly because I wanted to avoid a lot of the technology that we have now, because now so many plot problems are just solved because you can just pick up your cell phone and call for help, or you can search anything on the internet. The internet was a thing in the early 90s, but not nearly as prolific as it is now. So by setting it back a couple of decades, I resolved a lot of those issues, and I just don't have to deal with them. Is that cheating? Yes, it is. And that's exactly why I'm doing it. But one question that I've been mulling over is, I have a fictional town that I've created several books ago that I'd written, and I've set a lot of the stuff I've written in this fictional town, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I've been toying with the idea of setting the story I'm writing in a real town, and specifically the town that I live in. Um, one reason is I know everything about this. I've lived here for 50 years, with the exception of a few years where we moved away. I know a lot of the ins and outs of it. Do y'all have if you're writing a book that's not science fiction or fantasy and you're not creating a world, what do you think about when you pick up a book and read it and it's about a real place versus a made up town that's informed by real places or something? Do y'all have an opinion about that at all?
I don't. Done well. It really can lead to interesting things, like, if you're curious about a set piece or whatever, you can go and usually see that. The books that I read that typically have this in them are the Gray Man books, and Mark Greaney will go to the places and take business trips and vacations or whatever you want to call it as a writer, and scout it out and plan his books loosely around the terrain. I think that you can use a regular town or fictional one, but even if you use the regular town, you can still have some creative license with that. Like, if you need a building that is not there, you can create that. And I think that some of those that leads credibility to your story as well, especially like for you're saying that you live there, so there's a lot of maybe little things that people might not know about the town that you could punch in there as kind of Easter egg type deals.
Amy, what do you think? Have you've written some books that are anchored in present time or thereabouts? Does that matter to you if it's a real place or a made up place?
I mean, not really. I'm good either way, as long as, like, if it's a real place, I think you should try to get the details as correctly as possible, because people are going to call you on it if they live there.
Right.
But like, say, like with Havenwood Falls, our little town was based off of Telluride, Colorado. So we just kind of took the location and then we started changing the details and made it our own. And but it was the geography was based off of that. So we would, like, when we would work on the Bible together, we'd go look and say, okay, what's the weather usually like in Telluride on, December, or November or whatever. And then we would just make sure that it's consistent. And it really helped us form this entire world. And then we also looked at, how difficult is it to get to, what's it like trying to, raise, like having vegetable gardens. Is it possible in this area? I mean, we went through this very, very detailed, like Google Maps, you name it. We were looking at everything. And I think it made it so real to the readers, even though it was fictional, that we had people saying, well, God, I wish I lived here. I want to live in Havenwood Falls. And we're like, yeah, we kind of do too now.
Well, I guess by basing it on a place, you get to bring in all the aspects of it without having to be true to it. Was that kind of the
because, I mean, obviously like some of the businesses I built for my characters, they don't exist.
right?
But at the same time, people can look up this, Telluride and look around and be like, this place is gorgeous. And we really did try geography, as far as the geography, to get it right so that everything else would feel real if they looked it up.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, I'm still kind of mulling that over, but I'm going to make a decision soon. It's not going to affect a whole lot, but there are a couple of little story ideas that I'm working on that I just can't decide if I want it to be anchored in this real place or not. So y'all are a lot of help. Thanks.
One of the downfalls, I ghost wrote a book a couple of years ago, and it was a present day thriller. And one of the set pieces in the climax of the story was Washington, D.C. And I had to basically create a car chase, but there had to be enough time for something to happen. And so I spent, I don't know, probably 3 hours on Google Maps with the measuring tool,
Right.
and measuring like even getting driving distances from one address to another and figuring out how far. And then there was a nuclear explosion that had to happen. And so there's a website you can go to that projects nuclear explosions and how far damage and debris and all that. So I had to bring that over and lay that over and see where that happened. And it was a lot of work, and it was a lot of pulling hair, but I think in the end, I think it worked out really well.
Josh, did you overlay DC traffic? Because I don't know if that car chase could have happened with everyone stuck.
This particular car, it happened on an interstate, like coming into DC, so they weren't in DC yet. Of course, there still probably could have been traffic. I have absolutely no idea. I didn't go that far.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: what did putting your story in DC give you that made all of that work worth it?
Well, I mean, there's some terrorists trying to blow up some stuff, and so it happens in New York and DC, and there's a couple other.
DC is such a loaded location. There's so much there. I mean, that kind of answers itself. Yeah,
it's like I said, I gross wrote it, so I didn't pick where it happened at. I just had to play around with what I had, and it worked out. I thought it was well written. I'm talking about myself, but whatever.
Well, since you ghost wrote that, can you mention the name of the book? A couple of people are asking.
I can't. I can't. Unfortunately, I can't say.
Yeah. That's the deal with ghostwriting a lot of times. Amy, your book is going to be a ghost story. Where are you setting that? Have you decided?
So I'm basing it off of the town I grew up in, because that's where some of the weird stuff that happened that I got the idea from happened. And as a matter of fact, I have an uncle that still lives there, and he went to where the house was at and sent me pictures. And I looked it up on Google Maps, and the house is gone. They've torn it down. So I just have like this empty lot, and I have to kind of see where it is now, you know. But I'm still trying to decide though if I want to base it in like the 80s
Yeah.
or if I want to, you know, do more present day. But the little town I grew up in, Blackwell, Oklahoma, and so I don't know yet if I'm probably going to give it a fictional name, and just base it off the town because a lot of it's going to be a lot of changing in the story, but I've even been talking with my siblings that remember some of this weird stuff, and we've been kind of going back and forth, and so yeah, I think it's best to place it as close as possible, at least to where it actually happened. But I'm probably going to change the name.
I'm going to tell you what, I'm becoming more and more of a fan of setting stories in the near past, because there's just so much you can do that is not hampered by technology. You know, when you're writing a sci-fi story, you're kind of pushing the technology, and then when you're anchoring it in the real world, the here and now, just rolling the calendar back just a little solves so many problems. It really does.
Yeah.
All you got to do is not run into a room full of chainsaws, and then you're good.
That easy. Yeah. I don't know why that's so hard, but
Yeah.
I'm not making any promises. But, with chainsaws, skill saws,
with
whatever.
research,
Right. Yeah, it's research. Yeah.
I've been watching one of my favorites, The Haunting of Hill House.
The Netflix series, or
yes, and I've got the book too, but I love watching. I just kind of let it play in the background while I'm doing other stuff to just kind of get the mood going. And you know, it's just I love it. I love it. It's like my favorite.
We're
creepy dude with the
Blind
long
Manor
legs
right
floating around the room.
Yeah,
like
the bent neck lady, and
that
I
got
love
me.
this
Oh,
twist.
the broke deck lady got me. I was out.
That's
I'm
such
like,
a fantastic twist. If you guys haven't seen it, oh
it's
my
great.
god, amazing.
It's such great. Yeah.
It's great writing.
Our youngest son Noah made Dawn and I watch that with him last year, and now this year for October he's making us watch Bly Manor.
Manor. That's a good one too. But I like
we have 2 episodes left, and I have to watch an episode and then hyperventilate into a bag, and come back the next day and watch another one. Ian, your story is going to be in Ireland, right? Is this going to be a historical story? Like what time frame are you thinking about?
So I am calling it Ireland, but Ireland in name only, because I want all of the liberty and freedom without writing myself into a corner per se.
Right.
As
you
for
think if you write
period,
it far enough in history, then
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. You kind of lose context.
All pre-Roman occupation. Just I'm gonna have the Druids as the main force that lived there. Some Celtic tribes. St. Patrick died in the year 460 AD, so roughly around that time period. Real early, way back when. And I found that setting it there, I don't have to worry about mixing up, important historical figures. There's not much written record for back then, so I have this whole sandbox, or box of grass, I suppose, because it's Ireland, to play around in. And I'm really hyped about that because I love not having rules and just being able to do what I want to do.
So will you refer to Patrick as Patrick or Maywin Suckett?
I was considering Maywin, but because I'm marketing this toward like kids that I teach, I'll probably stick with Patrick or some derivative thereof.
Yeah.
Haven't really decided yet. Whatever's more accessible for the audience.
Gotcha.
Are you going to keep his time as a slave?
Yes. That's going to be a driving force of the Act 1. In fact, like it's going to open with stuff popping off. I'm probably going to open with a tavern because cliches are they're cliches for a reason. Yeah. But yeah, I'm going to.
I never would have known you ran a D&D game if you wouldn't have mentioned the tavern.
Yeah, or my dice tower here.
Or your
yeah. there will be, without spoiling too much, things will be fine at first. I'll keep his time as a slave, and while he's in captivity, that's when he's going to notice, hey, there's some weird stuff popping off. I would like to get a piece of that action, and that will take us into the meat of the story.
Okay. All right. Interested to read that Act One. That's gonna be awesome.
I already have a prologue in mind. I have several characters in mind. I'm thinking about killing off a main character, but I don't want to do it too soon. There would be no emotion. I don't want to lose the audience, and I don't want to cheapen it by doing it too soon. But someone's going to die. I need it to happen.
That's a tightrope that you walk with killing characters,
Yes.
because it is this going to have series potential, and if it has series potential, what do you take a series once you've killed off the main character?
Right.
You've got to spin it, to the side somehow, or and this is one of the great tensions in storytelling is do your characters really do they really experience jeopardy, or if your readers can't experience jeopardy through your characters, how do you maintain that tension while also leaving series potential, if that's
right. Yeah, it's that, and that's what I've been struggling with a lot the past couple of weeks. Like I know that there is going to be potential for book 2, possibly even book 3. So I can't kill off certain characters, or I could do a fake out where I kill a character and then maybe big bad evil guy for book 2. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, Nick and Jason at Galaxy's Edge, famously killed off a very favorite character in one of their first books that they wrote.
Mhm.
But that hasn't stopped them from writing lots of prequels, which are awesome. And they're still, like, right now, they're in progress of writing more. I'm editing one that's ongoing. That character is going strong. So there are ways to do it. But
if you start far enough into the story, then
it's true.
you have prequel potential for days.
Right.
Yeah.
It helps to kind of think about that in the beginning so that you know what your possibilities are, I guess.
Right. And you could use magic. You could use magic with your world that you're creating.
Yes.
But at the same time, you don't want to you don't want to cheat in a way. Like, you don't want to create hacks that the reader feels are cheap.
Mhm.
They have to have some kind of reward in the plot, like some kind of twist that makes it feel like that you didn't cheat and like cut corners or something.
Yeah.
And then, to create that tension, readers have to actually believe that someone could die or else it's fake. On the other hand, they mentioned George R.R. Martin, right? And that's one of the reasons why he killed off so many characters, is because he wanted to have actual tension in his plot.
Right.
But me as a reader, I felt like I can't get emotionally invested in any of these characters if they might die off or turn evil soon, right? So it's like, what's the point in getting so like connected with them if I'm just going to get burned? I've been burned so many times, I don't want to get burned at all. So I ended up like Wikipediaing the plot of, like, after book 4, I just read the summaries.
My wife and I were discussing that the other night, because I've seen all of Game of Thrones and she has not, and she's like, "Why should I? Like, I know that certain characters are going to die, so why should I get invested?" I'm like, "Okay, but that's a good point. I don't have a good rebuttal for you. Just watch it." And she's
My wife came to Game of Thrones late, and I think I was watching season 6 at the time, and she saw the dragon lady, and she was like, "I want to watch this show." And so then we get all the way up to the episode of the Red Wedding, and she turns to me and she says, "I really like Rob. He's my favorite character. I love him. I think he is the best character of this whole show." Literally the same episode as the Red Wedding. And I'm just sitting there like, oh man.
Okay.
That's rough. Yeah. And then after that episode happened, she wouldn't watch Game of Thrones for like a week. She was like, "Nope, I'm not touching her." No, I don't blame her at all. Yeah.
Oh man. Fred Looney has a question that I popped up on the screen. By using a real location, are you worried about creating a character who too closely matches a real person who runs the local tavern? No, but the place where I'm thinking about setting this has a very tumultuous political history. Let's just put it that way. Over the last 40 to 50 years. And if you set it there, you can use some of that if you're careful with it. But and this is another thing when you're talking about world building, the politics of your world or how people interact with one another, and some of the fallout from that, it will affect your story and how your characters interact with the world. But is that something that you want to deal with? If you make a fictional town, you can wash away all of that history and not have to deal with it. So that's kind of one of the things I'm working through right now. Do I want to have the potential for that history to be there or not? And I'm trying to weigh out whether there are benefits to that or if that's just full of landmines that I just would rather step over.
If you have
Great.
a real town, though, or you can create land, you can use landmarks as part of your plot that can give the reader opportunity to start predicting
Right.
what might happen, what choices characters might make, and then get the fun of seeing if their predictions are true. Like DC and Marvel use New York City a lot,
Yeah.
and part of it is because some of the locations are so iconic.
Right.
And you're watching, even if a movie play out around the Statue of Liberty or something, and people can start guessing what's going to happen in the future, and then seeing if their guesses pan out, or seeing places that they've recognized that they know before, and they're like, I knew that wouldn't work because of the Statue of Liberty is made out of this kind of metal, not that, or that place is just too small for such a thing to pan out, or for that plan to work, or something about Central Park that is key to the plot afoot. So it's like an extra little reward for the reader who's been there, especially if it's a place like New York, or like with Harry Dresden. The further the series goes on, the more Chicago takes like a central role in
Right.
how the plot plays out and why something fails or succeeds because of the Chicago landscape. So that can be fun for some readers. And also they get to see the fantasy meet reality and to start blending. So depending on what your genre is, like if it is fantasy, urban fantasy, even horror, I think too, some of that like real world meets the fantasy world is fun
Right.
for the reader to immerse in. And you can do that with real locations in a way you can't do with made up ones.
Right. Lauren, your book, the fantasy, the portal fantasy, if you will, where a team of rangers fall into a Tolkien-esque world.
Yes.
Did they name that world? I can't remember.
It is the ruin, but it's
Okay.
Earth.
Okay.
So it's Earth after a nano plague has been unleashed, and it's
Okay.
10,000 years in the future. So it does have some of that like overlap of the real world meets fantasy, because we're in France, we're in Italy, we're in Germany. It's just the world has been ruined by this nano plague that's kind of introduced like D&D type elements into the plot. So the
So like Wheel of
recognizable.
Time.
I have not read The Wheel of Time.
Okay. This side
Is that-
tangent, but
is
this
that-
this will be fun.
Yeah.
Josh, and Steve Bowyer started a podcast that I think we got
Horrible.
3 episodes or something.
3
where
episodes.
we were
tried.
going to read through the entire Wheel of Time and then talk about it, and we realized really quickly this was not something that we wanted to torture ourselves with.
We got
but
a crap ton of listens though.
Nice.
Oh, we made a lot of people mad by just saying I don't know that this is something I want to invest in for 13 books.
Yeah.
As one of my main things that I'm doing right now. But one thing that we learned pretty quickly was that the world of Wheel of Time is our world after some things happen. Didn't we?
I have absolutely no idea. I don't remember. I
Yeah.
read the first book and then forgot it.
Checked out.
Yeah.
Checked out.
Yeah.
Brooke Shanner is our world after a lot of stuff goes down.
Yeah.
Well, and I
Jerry Brooks also
the
Shannara is
yeah, I
our
was going to
world.
mention that one is our world.
Yeah.
There's a series of books called The Demon Cycle by Peter V. Brett,
Brett. Yep.
and he doesn't ever say this is Earth, but
Right.
there are things that you find or that you come across in the journey of the books. You're like, is this Earth or not? Because it kind of sounds like you're mentioning a freeway, like a concrete like bridge or something that goes around.
Right.
But obviously the characters don't know bridge, like they don't know what it is. It's, you know, broken down and all that stuff, so they describe it as something different. But um I really like that type of callback, especially like what you're talking about, Lauren, and Forgotten Ruin. You know, seeing what the ruins would look like 10,000 years.
Yeah.
Yes, Leo. Looking like 10,000 years in the future, but, you know, not really pointing out that that's what it is. Like, oh, that's the Eiffel Tower 10,000 years, but you don't ever say it's the Eiffel Tower, right? Like, I
Right.
like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So it should be things that people who've been there can somewhat recognize.
Yeah.
But we've got orcs and vampires and elves and stuff all over it. And so elements of their culture can harken back to like medieval times, and you can have that like playground, but you also have the whole D&D type playground.
Right.
So I can bring in fairy tale type elements. And there's actually some suggestions that there's beings from outside of Earth and outside of the D&D type world. So there's maybe other worlds that can be explored too.
Nice.
So
Josh,
abilities.
what's your setting for your new book? You haven't published the first book yet because you just finished it, obviously.
Right.
So where does this take place?
It's far future. It's
Okay.
It's multiple worlds. Our galaxy, Earth is there and all that, but doesn't take place on Earth. It's funny because you were mentioning wanting to write in the 80s because they lack technology, and I've been grounding my head for 2 weeks trying to figure out how to do the stuff with all the technology that I invented. And then I'm like, how do I break all of that? I need to get around some of this stuff. And so yeah, I've been playing around with advanced computers and processing and interface the characters. One of the characters is Spike, which is a hacker, and she can basically visualize and mentally navigate a computer system without needing a computer screen or anything like that. She can do it all in her head. And so visualizing that for the reader has been kind of a challenge. And I try not to go super technical because I'm not super technical, but also I find that some of that stuff isn't what I like writing or reading. So I don't dumb it down, but I make it very layman, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've noticed doing this project, and this is the first time I've written 3 books before I've published them, and it's allowed me to, now I'm 80% done planning book 2. There's a lot of events in book 2 now that I can foreshadow in book 1 in very small ways, that when you read them in book 2, you're like, oh, he's genius. And I'm like, no, I'm an idiot. I came up with that and went back and wrote it in book 1. For instance, I had it's basically Mission Impossible in space, right? So you've got to have some really cool things happen. You've got to have some fun set pieces, some intrigue and all that stuff. And one of the sequences that I was trying to create was basically meeting this broker that was going to facilitate a weapons deal, an arms sale. And I was like, well, we'll just meet him in a shady warehouse. And over a couple of days, I'm like, that's really boring. And I feel like that's kind of overdone. And so instead of doing that, I said, well, we won't meet him. We'll meet his associate, and we're going to do it at a sporting event. I was at a football game last weekend, and I was like, stadium, lots of people, that could be fun. And so I ended up creating an entire sport and an entire multi-level stadium that can seat 200,000 people. And it's I called it War Ball, and it's basically like a multi-tiered American football meets motion controlled robots, and they can destroy each other as the game progresses. The more devastating their weapons become, and yeah, so that was fun creating that. But in the context of the project, I didn't have Warball in mind at all when I wrote book one, but now I can go back in book one and have a character mention my Warball team, or they're watching Warball at a bar on TV, and it's mentioned in passing, but it's something that sticks in the reader's mind. Is like, oh, that might be interesting. What is this Warball thing? And then I could drop them right in the middle of a Warball game in book two, and it kind of has that. Doesn't have really any payoff for the plot as a whole, but getting a little bit more immersed in the world, I think that trigger will makes the world seem that much.
That's one of
real.
those layers of world building that just adds to the depth that
Right.
just adds on. So
Yeah.
So it looks like Amy and I are going to be struggling to make our books as realistic as possible, while Josh, Lauren, and Ian are either slinging their stories so far forward or so far back that it doesn't matter. So I don't know if I should be jealous or
Yeah, I don't know. I don't. I feel like sometimes I have the easier job coming up with stuff that is not. It doesn't have any basis in reality, and then you going back 20 years, then you have to remember the constraints of 20 years ago.
Right.
Like remember that you didn't have navigation in your car, or you didn't have a
Right.
cell phone, or you might you didn't have the Motorola Razor, you had a pager, right? And so like that kind of stuff, I'd be Googling like pop hits for this time period. So if a song came on the radio and some readers like that was in 93 and not 89, and you're like, okay, sorry.
That's why if you have a main character that has an old car with a cassette player and they have a Def Leppard cassette stuck in the tape deck, then that problem solved. All they ever listen to is Pour Some Sugar on Me over and over again.
Indeed.
So last week we I had put together this this slide show where we looked at characters and what makes them great, and I have come up with a few
more spreadsheets. I like it.
Yes, I know. Just back to the old PowerPoint. So first off, Brandon Sanderson's Fantasy World, Roshar from the Stormlight Archive. There's enough of this world that is familiar, but it is completely fantasized. When you're dealing with a world like this, like none of the constraints of that there's a different gravity, there are weather systems that are play heavily into the plot, and this is an example of a fantasy world completely made up, and all of the ways that it's not Earth factor into the characters and the plot and all of that. Have any of you guys, Josh, I know you've read Stormlight Archive. Has anyone else read any of Brandon Sanderson's? I think there's 4 books in the Stormlight Archive so far.
I read the first one, but it's been a while.
Yeah. When you're Lauren, you especially are dealing with a fantasy world. What do you think about a world that is so different from ours that plays into how the characters become different from us because the world is so different, and kind of the way that it kind of falls out over all aspects of your story.
Yeah. I think the common theme we're hearing tonight is that setting is time and place. Usually we think place, but it's also when. And that's going to make direct effects on your story itself, on the characters themselves, who they are, what they look like, how they act like, what choices they can make. But also it's going to make effects on you as an author about what you can do with your plot or not do with your plot. If you choose a fictional place or a real place, you're going to have to make different choices, and your plot might change. With Stormlight Archives, it's a very imaginative place, so he's got opportunities to do things that you wouldn't be able to in on Earth. I remember I read Mistborn, and I personally wasn't keen on it. I felt like the world
Mute her. Mute her now, Hank.
was kind of drab. Like everything was dead, right? So my imagination sees lots of browns and grays. And I just wasn't like really just thrilled to be there, to be in that imaginative world, to be sucked into it. But I was like, no, I'm reading this. So I really had to kind of like force myself to read a fantasy novel. And that's not why I read fantasy. I read fantasy to get sucked up in it. So
Have you read the second era of Mistborn, where it's like the Wild West?
I read is it 3 books or 4 books? I read that series. If there was another series after it, I haven't read that.
Yes, there's another
Ooh.
era. Yeah, the
Okay.
4th book is coming out this fall, I think.
I am very willing to be reconvinced and to take another look.
And side note, Mistborn is not set on Roshar, just FYI.
Right.
Yes, it's not. And Stormlight Archives did not give me those vibes at all. It was very, very colorful, lots of different cultures and stuff. Lots to fascinate me and capture my attention. I think life stopped me from reading book 2, not the series itself. So yeah, with an imaginative place, you have the opportunity, but make something cool and make something fun.
Yeah. All right,
Hank, really quickly before you go to the next slide, fun fact about the Roshar map that people might not know is it's taken almost directly from the Julia set, which is a fractal pattern. And I've got it pulled up if I can share my screen and show. It's a mathematical pattern that they put into visual, and it is pretty neat. Hold on, let me oh, I can't share because you're sharing. Oh, do I?
I'm sorry. Hold
no,
on.
Here we go. I got it. Let's see.
Okay.
Okay. There we go.
So
that is the Julia set pattern.
Oh, wow.
And then that is Roshar. Obviously, he had to take some creative license with some of the places, but that is a screen grab of the fractal pattern, because the fractal pattern is a 3-dimensional pattern. You can look up the video on YouTube and see how they move it around. But he took that fragment of the Julia set, and that's what he designed Roshar after.
Okay, that's awesome. I didn't know that at all. That's
cool.
That is amazing.
I don't read Stormlight Archives at all. I'm not a huge nerd super fan, I promise. But I am there.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm making a note now. I'm gonna have to dig that up in a little bit. Okay. All right. Here's something we're all familiar with. Hogwarts. Hogwarts is an interesting an interesting setting, because unlike portal fantasy, which we talked about earlier, where a character is in the real world and then gets sucked into another world, a fantasy world, but they're from our world. Hogwarts is a fantastical place, but the people bring the magic to there. Like it's a place full of magic, but it's only full of magic because the people bring the magic with them, if that makes sense. So it's a magical place, but it's not. I wouldn't classify it the same way as a portal fantasy, for instance, like Narnia, where you go through the wardrobe and then you're in a different place. What do you guys think about Hogwarts? What is it that makes this such a great setting?
Well, it's a great example of urban fantasy, right? Where the fantasy elements are in our world. So there's so much crossover and mingling, particularly when he's back at home in London. There is a little tiny element of the portal fantasy in that he goes through the train station.
True.
But the world itself is on Earth. So all of that crossover and mingling is fun to be a part of.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I think that's what I like about it too, is that it mixes, real world with this other side. Like we just can't see this other side. It's hidden to the normal person. And I love that, because you can think, you just look around you and think, what things can't I not see that are there? What things are happening right now that I don't notice? I mean, even if it's just, insects and their entire, if you think about insects and their entire, environment and everything that they do that we never notice. And I just think about things like that. That's something that I think about with Hogwarts, is like, it's so much happening and no one knows it's happening because they're not a part of that.
Right.
I think
Ian,
the
you look like
setting
you have an opinion.
it's interesting to me because this is set in rural Scotland. Why is NORAD not aware of Hogwarts on the map? Why is no one monitoring that? It's just like a
100%.
major problem that is just waiting to spill out. So I think Hogwarts is a testament to the power of Rowling's magic system. So I points for Hogwarts for that, because every nuke should be pointed at that castle at any moment. So
Well, and there's something to be said about nostalgia too, right? Like everybody knows what it's like to go to grade school, and
Right.
everybody wanted to have their school, like they wanted to do cool things in their school, and seeing floating candles and magical creatures and ghosts, and being able to knock your teachers down with a spell, or even turn your classmates into different things. Like that's all like just like real fantasy for a lot of people, and to be able to experience that in the books, and I think the movies did a phenomenal job presenting that as well. That kind of nostalgia will just pull readers in, and it's true, obviously.
Absolutely. All right, let's see. I can't remember what I put on these slides. So,
Speaking of
Narnia,
which,
the actual Portal Fantasy. I did include it. I couldn't remember. So Narnia is a place that you go through the wardrobe, and I don't know if C.S. Lewis. I'm trying to remember if he ever defined where Narnia is. I don't think so. I think it just was on the other side of the wardrobe, and it's this magical place that's it, for why is it, do you think, that fantasy worlds are always set in the distant past where there's almost no technology? Why do you think that fantasy worlds, why we like to latch on to those time periods and the level of technology and that sort of thing? What's the draw of that, do you think?
I think it has a lot to do with World War One, how technology shifted so far forward so fast that we have this generational trauma where people are looking back to ye olden times where things seemed better because not as many bad things could happen so quickly.
Well, I think that was definitely a motivating force for Tolkien.
Yes.
I mean, if you read Lord of the Rings in that light, knowing that most of that was dreamed up while he was in a trench in World War One, that makes a lot of sense.
I think the ring rates were like clouds of black smoke from cannon fire or something. He's like, yeah, this is definitely going in a book because this is in my nightmares every night.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Portal fiction is old.
Yeah.
The idea of like fairyland is another world that's kind of over top of ours, and there are thin places that you can push through to get to that other world, and that can push through to this world too. And that idea is present in a lot of cultures around the world, but also back in like our Gaelic past. So you were talking about, St. Patrick in the 400s. I'm thinking of Beowulf. Beowulf was written around 800. And just in that world, that's set in what we think of the medieval, it's not the medieval, but we think of that in the olden days. And even then, there's this crossover where monsters can be in our world that are also somehow related to our human lineage too. Grendel's past goes back to Cain. So there's this crossover between our world and theirs. But why do we kind of culturally have so many of these fantasy stories set in like medieval times? I don't know. I'm not sure. It's just it's fun to look at, but there are other times that you can consider. But I don't know,
Yeah.
swords, dragons, it's just so cool.
I think there's a, obviously it's fantasy for a reason, but you want to put your characters up against dragons. Doing that in modern times is cool, but then you just call in an F-18 and blow them out of the sky. Like
Hmm.
Right.
dragons become less of an issue right
Yeah.
now than they were back when you just had a bow and arrow. You
True.
mentioned the fairyland and the kind of the thin border between worlds. Servants of War that just came out a couple of months back by Larry Correia and Steve Diamond. Their fantasy is set in about a World War One time, but it's not on Earth, and they explain kind of some of that. But they mention that there's a thin border in places where fairies and werewolves and all that stuff, all the creatures that we would experience on Earth as mystical beings, come from other planets through these thins, and then the humans go through the thins and get on the other planets. And it's very interesting to see the different, because it's not technically fantasy, even though there's magic and different races and creatures, but it's set in World War One type with trench warfare and all that stuff. Very good book.
I think there's a real interest in portal fantasies right now. There's where people from our modern era fall into these old stories and these old settings, and I think there's a lot of interest in that right now. So I'm intrigued to see what kind of comes out of that. Let's move on to the next one, The Expanse by James S.A. Corey. Josh, this is kind of in line with what you're doing. Well, kind of. It's humans from Earth, but in the future where we have left the planet and are colonizing the solar system, and so a lot of this book takes place on space stations and different colonies that have sprung up. And what you find are interesting things that anytime you get a group of people together, you got to figure out how these people are going to work and live together. And that causes all sorts of political strife and, just how do we behave toward one another? And that's one thing that I think that world building gives you opportunities is what are we going to do to see how this affects how human interaction is going to work out. This is has anyone read the Expanse series or watched the Amazon Prime series?
I've read I think the first 5 books. I think there's 9 or 10 total. I've read the first 5, and I've watched the whole series. I liked it. I liked the TV show a lot more than the books because they condensed a lot of the stuff down from the books and it was good, but it was actually better condensed.
Yeah.
There were some things obviously the TV show did differently than the books. I thought that it's funny. A lot of people mention The Expanse and they'll mention the science or the hard science aspect of it. And I mean, yes, on a relative scale, you could say that it was hard sci-fi, but it's definitely more space opera than not, because there's a lot of things that happen in the story that have absolutely no basis in physics or reality at all. And in my opinion, when you talk about hard sci-fi, that stuff gets thrown out the window and you've only got to do what is scientifically possible. But I digress. The setting, phenomenal. In the book and in the show, they did a very good job showing space life, and it wasn't pretty. In some places it was rough. Some places people had it better than others, but it was always very dangerous. And I think a lot of people forget that about space, that it is just out to kill you everywhere you go. And I thought that show got it well and got the It works because it does, Josh. Absolutely right. If you can't make it happen, it's a quantum field or something that you can do.
Right.
I thought the setting was fantastic.
Yeah.
The characters were fun. The ship was an amazing set piece, and they took it to different places every season. And I think that if you're going to explore settings in that environment, explore all of them that you can. That's my opinion.
When you're talking about hard sci-fi, if you set your book far enough in the future, that becomes less and less of a problem because you have no idea what our scientific discoveries will
Right.
lend,
Yeah.
So that's one of those things that you can quibble about if it's present or near future. But if you put it out far enough, you could use a lot of hand wavium because you just
Yeah.
you never know. All right, what's up next? Longmire, from my friend Craig Johnson. The Longmire series takes place in a fictional Wyoming county called Absaroka County, loosely based on where Craig lives in Ucross, Wyoming, population 25. And one interesting thing that Craig does with Longmire is that he's got this setting of the modern-ish town that also butts up against a Native American
reservation.
Thank you. I couldn't grab that word out of the ether so you've got the setting of the settlers, after several generations that have, formed this town, and that becomes integral to the story. But then the native people who live there and the tensions that are brought about by having a reservation right next to a town, and each group of people think that that they are the true owners of the place, and you've got lots of tension that comes out of that, and then you throw in a dead body and you've got a story. So I love what Craig does with the Longmire series. A real-ish place with real-ish problems and tensions, and it makes for great stories. Any of y'all read the Longmire series or watched the Netflix series?
And my husband and I have seen every episode.
Nice.
Love it.
Yeah, we really enjoyed it.
I liked it. My only gripe, and I lived in Cheyenne, Wyoming for 6 years. My only gripe is that the entire population of the state of Wyoming can fit in the metropolitan area of Wichita, Kansas. And we don't have as many murders a year as they have every year. Not to mention the county that he lives in. And it's just, how many people are going to die in your county for these people just going to say, you're probably not doing a really good job as sheriff, man, because you're killing 30% of the people every year.
Well, we lost Angela Lansbury this past week, I think it was, and her TV show, Murder, She Wrote. This little bitty town in Maine, and she trips over dead bodies every time you turn around.
Mm-hmm.
How many seasons of that show did they do where she's got a stack of bodies 600 deep? Did anyone ever look that maybe she's killing people because she's bored? Or
that would have been an ultimate twist. Like it gets to the season finale and she's been doing it all along.
That had been a fantastic ending to it. Yeah,
she'd be a psychopath because she's also not just killing the person but setting up someone else. And then
100%.
Very old school Dexter kind of stuff there.
Wow.
Right. Well, I hear that Dahmer series is doing really well on Netflix right now. Somebody should take, I forget the character's name in Murder, She Wrote, but that needs to be a spinoff series for sure.
When I saw that announcement on Facebook that she died, I turned to my wife and go, "Man, Bedknobs and Broomsticks was my favorite movie when I was a kid." And she looked at me with this blank stare. I didn't have any, and I'm like, "Oh, it's a great movie. They jumped on a bed and they went to these places. There were these cartoon animals and they played soccer. And I was like, honestly, when you say it like that, it sounds really stupid, but it's a really good movie."
Yeah. So you ever think that sometimes you deserve the blank stares that you get?
Oh yeah, for sure, 100% I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Next up, Harry Bosch. So Michael Connolly writes the Bosch series, another book series turned into a great TV show. One thing, if you've ever watched the TV show, and it very much mimics the book series, is that Bosch is a very much a slow burn. You get a lot of Los Angeles and Southern California, and you really get immersed in that place before things really start to heat up and the plot takes off. So he really takes a lot of care in really building up the characters there and how they interact with the people and the natural tensions that happen in a huge sprawling city. Bosch is really well done and is a great example of a place that's anchored in a real place and highlights the real plot that comes out of having, what is it, 9 million people in this one geographic region. Anybody familiar with the Bosch series?
I loved Harry Bosch. I watched the series. I know Ian looks like he's waving and he watched it too. I don't want to take up all the airtime. I feel like I have already, but I love the series. I love the settings. I've read a couple of the books, and he always makes a point to make this city a character in the book, and I think that's vital, especially if you're doing something like that. If you want to capture the city to make it a character in your book, and I thought he did a really good job with that in the books, but also in the TV show.
Yeah, didn't read that, but did read Jurassic Park, and there's an example of the setting being the villain.
Oh yeah, right.
And not just the dinosaurs, but the actual park, like the way the park was set up, and then how it
I
failed.
wish I would have thought of that. That's a great example.
Fantastic example.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Lauren wins the prize tonight.
You get the sticker tonight.
Michael Connolly gets it. He wrote the thing.
No. Michael Crichton wrote Jurassic Park.
Crichton. Oh man.
Okay.
Yeah, see, I lost my sticker.
Okay, just imagine Harry Bosch, but with T-Rexes.
Oh, that'd be great. Be awesome.
Okay. I mean,
okay.
I'm down with it.
That sounds
all right.
fun.
What's next? Ready Player One.
Ooh.
An example of a dystopian future by Ernie Klein. Who's read Ready Player One? Anyone?
I've tried
seen the movie.
Times.
Ready Player One is 10 years in the future, or 10 to 20 years.
I think it's 10 to 20. I don't know if it ever actually comes out and says what the actual date was.
Yeah, there were some clues, but I think you're right. I don't know that he ever nails that exactly when it is, but a dystopian future with but he also manages to keep a hopeful tone throughout, which is very difficult to do in a dystopia. But this is a great example of the track that we're on and showing the downside or the detriments to the path that we're on and how it can play out, which I think is the purpose of dystopia, to as a story, as a warning, so to speak, while also kind of keeping the hopeful nature that humans will find a way and figure it out. Anyway, any thoughts on Ready Player One?
This book has 3 settings that all interact. One is like that dystopian future. 2 is the online world that he's doing all the competitions on, and 3 is 1980s America.
I was just gonna say that this book nailed the physical world building of creating the area of the game and the real world in the dystopian setting, but the nostalgia factor, like going back to Harry Potter and you remember the school and all that. All of it was in the future, but all of the references were references that we would get because that's from our childhood, or that's from where we're growing up. And so you're hitting 2045. Okay. So you're hitting multiple fronts. And because the physical setting was so good, and the nostalgia world building was so great, combining the two really, really made this book really, really good. I didn't like the second book very much. I thought he tried a little too hard on Armada. Ready Player One is fantastic, though.
Yeah, yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Um, and yeah, Lauren, you're absolutely right. There's three settings to this book, and he absolutely nailed all of them. So if nothing else, this book should be used as a text for how to do immersive storytelling in an alternate reality for
Yeah.
sure. One more. Let's see. Outlander. This is an Outlander is interesting because it's a book that initially takes place in the past, in just as World War II is ending or has ended. So 1945, 1946. I forget exactly what the years, but it's right after the end of World War II. And then she time travels back, is it 200 years into the past, to Scotland, and then she is experiencing real history um as an outsider, as an outlander. So there's a lot going on there, but the world building is she's very true to not only the history of the 1940s but also the 1700s in Scotland. And so a lot of interesting things going on there. And then she knows about the future, and and the ultimate kind of how history is going to play out for the people that she's you know fallen there amongst. And then you know she holds the knowledge, and then how do you get that across to the people? So lots of stuff going on there, but she absolutely nails the feeling of 1700 Scotland, and really does a tremendous job of it. Anybody familiar with Outlander?
Yeah, I actually I had an opportunity to meet Diana and hear her speak several years ago, and she was talking about her as a, I believe she was a history professor when she started writing this, if I remember correctly. So she used a lot of the knowledge she already had when she started the series, and she talked a lot about just all the research and all the people that she consulted with as she put the story together. It was really, really interesting. But I really like the time travel trope. I think it's a lot of fun because you can do a lot with it, putting someone in a completely different environment and seeing how they react.
Right. I had Diana on Author Stories several years ago, and one thing that she told me that completely blew my mind was that she writes her books completely out of order, just as scenes come to her. She writes a scene and then pieces them all together after the fact. That would make me an anxiety ball. I don't know how that worked. I mean, it obviously works for her, but that would send me to a mental institution, I think.
Time travel, it fits though, because she's
Well,
jumping
with
around in
yeah,
space.
time travel, it fits, except that her characters can't just jump through time willy-nilly.
Yeah,
They land in time and have to be there. So
There, yeah.
yeah.
yeah,
Time travel, you have to decide pretty early on what you're gonna do about time continuum question, right? Like, can she change the past for the present? Like, you have to decide whether you can do that or not, just like Back to the Future had to decide. That's a big choice you have to make. Just like with science fiction, you have to decide, what am I going to do with faster than light travel? How am I going to work that out? It's like one of the first questions you have to answer before you can answer anything else.
Hand wavium.
Hand you can do that with time too.
It's true.
I want to write a Robin Hood time travel story where you have this like GTA Grand Theft Auto protagonist who stumbles through time, and he actually takes up the mantle of Robin Hood. The problem is that I'm not smart enough to write. Once I figure out how that's going to work, I'd love to try my hand at that.
Well, I need to see how that turns out.
Yeah.
We'll
I
see.
just need Robin Hood to just come in with a 50 cal and just start smoking. I don't know how to make that happen, but it's a bucket list thing.
I mean, even if he
Huh.
went with a 6-shooter and some extra rounds, he'd be
That'd be
well
way
above.
better. Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
I just want to put some C4 in the middle of like Sherwood Forest, see what happens.
Mm.
Put some plastic explosives on a carriage. And everyone's like, how did you do that? I don't know.
I don't know, but Sheriff of Nottingham is nothing against some flashbangs.
True.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, guys, that's going to wrap up our discussion on world building tonight. Is Wednesday night working for everybody?
Works for me.
Seem to be a neutral time for
Yeah.
everybody. Okay. Well, we will do this again next week, and I haven't decided on a topic yet. Is there a topic that anyone wants to hone in on for next week's discussion?
I'll ponder. I
Okay.
can't.
Think about it.
Yeah. You guys think about it and let me know, and we'll nail it down for next week. But anyway, thanks for joining us, everybody. And if you haven't registered yet for the writing challenge, go over to storycraft.cafe. Still plenty of time to get in. We're going to start writing in earnest very soon, and we'd love to have you along. Lauren, Josh, Ian, Amy, thanks as always.
Have a good night.
See you, bud.
You guys.